Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to Namaste, Lake Chapala. Of course, welcome to the experience of Namaste, as we say almost every day, because that is our only focus, our only goal is to enter into the actual experience of this consciousness, of this vibratory reality. We could express it in so many different ways, but it really just comes down to being fully present right here, right now. So let's begin by doing that. Let's just take a nice deep breath together and be conscious of the sound of the birds, the energy of this joining, this holy joining. Be conscious of any sounds that are in your room. If you want, you can even look around and choose to see them as God sees everything, as one, as whole, as holy and blessed. It's a choice. Unfortunately, we have become rather adept at choosing something else. But look at the birds of the air. They neither sow nor do they reap, and yet God gives them everything that they need. O ye of little faith. Don't you think the same will be true for you? Of course it is. If we become fully present with the presence that is all around us, even now. So take one more deep breath and see if you can touch the presence that is touching you, that is holding you right now. And when we hear the rooster in the background, that's just the reminder that it's time to wake up. And all the birds respond to the awakening. I love sitting up here in the trees when I do these sessions. It makes me feel like I'm one with the oneness of nature itself. There it is. So let's begin. We're going to share a little bit of two different sources today. The first will be the first part of the next lesson in The Impersonal Light, the book I'm working on with Baraka's help. And then we're going to listen to a little bit of what Richard Rohr says today, because I love hearing when what we are sharing completely corresponds to what's being shared by another beautiful teacher, especially when they're Franciscan. So let's go ahead and let me read a little bit to this. This is from chapter 12, and the title of this is I Am All There Is. I'm going to share something that may be difficult for you to consider at this point, because it's important for you to hear and to welcome this truth. Here it is. I desire you just as much as you desire me. The only difference is that I am very clear about what I desire, while you are still confused. You still believe it's possible to want more than one thing, and that idea has brought you great suffering. The idea that you could want more than one thing. My only desire is to know and extend what is whole and true, and I am doing that right now by knowing who you are. In fact, it's impossible for me to know anything but this, since there is nothing in the universe to oppose this truth. It is and always remains what it is now. It is and always remains what it is right now. The truth within you, that holy divine presence within you. And as it's saying here, when we realize this, then we will only want that. When we realize this, we will only extend that. There will be nothing in us but that, because that is all there is. All of these shadows that we have tried to add to all there is disappear on their own when the light begins to shine this bright. So as we say over and over and over, it keeps coming down to desire. What do you really want? And when you only really want one thing, to know and to extend that truth, it will be the only thing you know. It'll be the only thing you do, because it is the only thing. And God's desire for you to experience that is the same as your desire, but God is not confused about that. Whatever God is, that divine force is not confused about who you are and how beautiful you are. It is a consistent whole truth. And now we choose to share that consistent whole truth. Okay, let me read a little bit more. I do not take my eyes off you, but you have certainly taken your eyes off of me, of your I am presence. Why? Because you wanted to see if it's possible to want something other than everything. Hold the horses. Did you hear that? You wanted to see if it's possible to want something other than everything, or something more than everything. Do you see how insane that idea is? But that is the hook. It's like that's the hook that gets set in your mouth, and now you can't get free from it. But there is one who can set you free, and it begins by realizing there is nothing more than everything. There's nothing more than everything, so you can't want more than that. You can't even want other than that. There's no desire other than everything. And when you realize this, then there is that one, you could call it the Holy Spirit, you could call it whatever you want, that is able to undo that hook, to take that hook of illusion from your mouth, like removing it from a fish that was now caught and now is put back into that infinite ocean. Let me read this one more time. I do not take my eyes off of you, but you certainly have taken your eyes off of me. Why? Because you want to see if it's possible to want something other than everything. It isn't, and yet you continue to try. All I am saying is stop trying to make the unreal real. Stop trying to make the impossible possible. It is the only cause of sorrow and pain. It has only caused you sorrow and pain, and yet heaven is waiting for your return. You just need to give up your petty need to be right about anything and admit that you've been wrong about everything. When you seek to gain something other than everything, then you're wrong about everything, because there's nothing more to gain, and it's already there. It's already whole within you. We cannot look anywhere else, because everywhere we look, we find the same thing: love itself. Now, this may sound like words and concepts to you until you choose it fully, because it has already chosen you fully, and then you will come into the experience that we talk about here every day. Then you will know at the deepest part of your being that this is true. There is no consequence to being wrong about what has never existed. That's a good one. There is no consequence to being wrong about what has never existed. Do you see that? You've been so concerned about the consequence that you have refused to turn back toward the light. This is the foundation of guilt within all of us. Perception is guilt. Separation is the seed of guilt for what never occurred in reality. So once again, you've been so concerned about the consequence, you've refused to turn back toward the light, but the light is never turned away from you. And now it's time for you to do the same. I love this. It's so focused and true that it's hard to miss it. It's hard to miss this experience. It's all about falling away from that untrue, unhealed, unknown self into the arms of your whole, true, eternal self. So let me read just a couple of paragraphs from what Richard Rohr sent out today so you can see how they combine. Richard says, when we meditate consistently, the sense of our autonomy and private self-importance, what we think of as our self, falls away. The sense of our autonomy and private self-importance falls away. Little by little, it becomes unnecessary, unimportant, and even unhelpful. The imperial I, or the self that we usually think of as our only self, reveals itself largely, I would say completely, as a creation of our mind, of our thoughts. But through regular access to contemplation, we become less and less interested in protecting this self-created relative identity. We become less and less interested in protecting this self-created relative identity. But please do not attack it, because that's negative energy. And when you do not feed it, it calmly falls away, and we experience a kind of natural humility. And this is how we know. I've said this many times before. Humility is the key. There is no puffed up look at me when we fall back into the arms of grace. There is only the reflection of that grace to everyone we see, to everyone we meet, the reflection of that eternal grace to everyone in every moment. That's how we know what Richard is calling a kind of natural humility, because it's ultimately just falling back into who you are and who you've always been, who you can never stop being. Take a deep breath. See if you can sense that natural, simple humility within you. It's always there. It's always ready to step forward if we just allow that self-important unreality to begin to dissolve. That's all. Just dissolve. We don't need to fight it. We don't need to resist it. Just allow it to dissolve. And the truth that has always been true emerges on its own. So Victoria, I'm going to ask you to step forward and share from your heart.
Oh, well, you caught me right in the middle of application, because something happened that got my dander up, riled me. So I'm right here in the application of this experience. And thanks, Jimmy, because thanks for keeping it so simple. It all comes down to our desire and mindfulness and the awareness of where our mind is wandering reveals the other desire that we're holding, so that now we can let it go. And you know, Jesus says this in the Course, what is Christmas except the time to give everything that we think we are or want, as you said, to the Holy Spirit, to one who can see what I can't see when I'm blinded by a shorter desire. And the other thing I'm reminded of as I'm applying this here, right in this moment, to put my eye on the divine. What did you say? Put my attention on what matters, and what doesn't matter will fall away.
Hmm.
That not to be fooled by continuing symptoms. If I'm still emotionally attached, as long as I've been willing to still keep my attention on what is immortal or eternal, and allow my false desires to fall away because I'm not nurturing them anymore. That takes a moment of personal experience to do that, to find that even if the emotional symptom of upset stays, that with the fulfillment of my attention on the eternal, I'll watch it fall away and come back into my natural self. And that self is humble because it's like a child. It doesn't assume anything about anyone or ourselves. It's just in a natural state of receptivity and giving. And the only thing that gets undone is that false desire. And very often it's about being right. You know, you want to be right or happy?
Right.
It's about being right. And the willingness to stay quiet. And what I find that the ego does is that false desire takes us onto many distractions rather than face the fact that I have a false desire. I would rather be this, that, or the other thing and have my brother right, wrong, or whatever than simply accept the correction that's at hand. So we distract ourselves. I can distract myself by what's for breakfast, or what am I going to do later, or who should I get in touch with. Those are distractions. When they come from the thinking mind, they serve the purpose of maintaining the false desire. No matter how spiritual or holy they might appear to be, they're not. And that's my own recognition of the wolf in sheep's clothing, how I use maybe functioning or getting things done or a list as a way to maintain this false desire rather than face it and look straight at the answer, live in the answer of the Holy Spirit with this simple little kid attitude of, okay, I trust you and I'm going to keep my mind on you. That's it. Just going to stop myself from distracting and stop myself from other thinking and stay uncomfortable maybe, or stay present with, I do have one desire. That is the truth. I do have one desire for life, love, for spirit, for the eternal, for the immortal, and stay there. So you caught me right there. That's what I'm doing. I'll give you a report tomorrow.
Okay. Application. That's what we
Yeah.
want. And by the way, you sparks something in me that is it's a question that the ego or the separate self-identity asks in every situation, and it's totally afraid of the answer. And that question is, who am I if I'm wrong? Who am I if I'm wrong about this? You know, what will happen if I'm wrong? And the Holy Spirit stops you and says, just be wrong. It's okay to be wrong about this, because when you realize you were wrong about all this, then you also at the same moment realize something that's right. But you can't realize what is true and right and whole and eternal until you let yourself be wrong about thinking that you were not that. I am that. That's the importance of the holy sacred name of God. I am whole and eternal. I am vibrating at that frequency right now, but I first have to admit that I was wrong in thinking that I couldn't do that. So once again, the ego or the separate self-identity is always afraid of being wrong. What happens then? Well, I'll tell you what happens then. You're right. You fall back into the rightness of your own true self, the wholeness of your own true self. That can't be a bad thing. The ego or the separate self identity wants to frame that as something to avoid. In reality, this is something to embrace. So be wrong about what never was, and allow what has always been to claim you. Oh, that was good. Thank you, Vicky. Okay, Teddy, let's hear from you now.
It's funny what you just said. Um, I'm involved in a discussion with the guys from Foundation for Inner Peace, and the guy who runs the place said something to me, and he was trying to correct me in a particular way about the use of the term soul and spirit. And there was an element of something in it that I hadn't heard before, and I started to think, and it was like and I knew he wasn't entirely right, but it did cause me, like you said, to have to go within and ask for an answer to get clarity. So the idea that I was being told I was wrong helped me actually to be righted, not to be right, but to be righted, to be headed in the right direction again. Um, I am going to take exception to something that you said. God has no desire for me to return home because, in fact, I never left. And he knows that for a fact. There's an idea that is sort of left out of the equation. Um, and it's early on where actually, in reality, there's one son, but there's two brothers. And one never left home, and one did attempt to leave home. But because God knows that there is only everything, he knows his son could never wander off except in a dream. So he doesn't even have a desire for us to awaken. That has to become our desire because, in fact, we never left. So God has no desire for us to return home, to realize anything, because in his mind, the impossibility of that leaves us in a dream, and the dream, is not true in any regard. So therefore, is not true to God at all. And the whole idea of desire, what screws us up, and everything you're reading, when the word now was added, it made perfect sense. Because in time, it does seem that we can have other than one desire, but we can't have any more than one desire now. And that's the nature of how we have to think. That's why we have to let go of the past and let go of the future being like the past, because in the now, we can only desire one thing. In time, we seem to have needs and things that we desire. And that's the nature and the reason why time was constructed by, as part of the illusion, to divide the now into segments and to have each segment seemingly contain something different so as to make us think there's a reality to it when there really isn't. But it's only in the now when we can have a single desire, and the ability to understand the nature of time within that now and our single desire actually is what brings us everything. It allows us to receive what we require rather than to search through time. So, God has no desire for me to return home. He's not missing me at all. And the idea that I can miss him is helpful when seen in the right way. And it is, time is what screws us up. And it's of our own making and does not exist like the rest of the dream. But we can use time as a way of, there's something that you said, of consequences. Time is the idea of consequences, but there are no consequences to anything we did because, in fact, we never did it at all, including make time. And it's within the now that that occurs, and we begin to understand that. The time is the area of consequences, but since time doesn't exist, there are no consequences, in fact, to time, other than a dream that's over in any second and never was.
Mm, beautifully put. I totally agree with everything. And another way of understanding that would be the child that is sound asleep in their bed, and the mother who comes into the bedroom doesn't miss her child who is asleep, because though the child may be wandering off in other worlds, seeming to be separate and alone, the mother knows that the child is safe.
Yep,
There in
exactly.
the bed, has never left and gone anywhere. And that's a better way of understanding it. Of course, these are all concepts that are meant just to untwist our mind, right? And ultimately none of them are right because none of them can quite go there, but they can push us in the right direction, give us a little bit of a shove. But I like that idea much more of the mother does not miss the child who's asleep because they're right there.
That's why I like the idea of being righted rather than being right.
I like that too. It's like a boat, you know, it just seems to be righted so that it can head in one direction
Right,
toward
exactly.
the ocean. Thank you, Teddy. Thank you, Vicky.